Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by again. I'm Rachel, and today I'm really excited to show you a French onion soup recipe. It is one of my favorite recipes. I find it really warm and comforting, especially during this autumn, moving into winter season. So our first step is going to be getting onions from the garden. I'll see you there. Okay, so we are now in the garden. I'm going to be showing you myself picking some of the little onions we grew this year. They're not very big, I apologize, but it's our first time experimenting with them, and it's been kind of fun to see the development. And we actually grew these from scraps that were indoors, and I'll show you a little bit more about that after. So, there we go, and you can see all the roots. So each onion that you cut the bottom and you save the scraps actually grows roots and will grow into these 3 smaller onions. And this is a really cool way to repurpose your food and also to grow your own in an inexpensive way. So first we have to go ahead and cut our onions. And what we're gonna wanna do is stick it in water. It always makes me cry, but this is one of the best tips that I've learned. If anyone has any other ones, drop it in the comments below. But I find that this really helps with cutting down on how much it irritates the eyes. And then from there, we're going to wanna cut some nice thin slices, which will then go into our soup. We're gonna saute it next, so that's the step after this one.
So did your trick work for you, or?
It works. Okay, the trick works. I'm still crying, but I would be crying more had I not dunked this in water. So just fun facts with Rachel. But yes, I'm still tearing up. Just grin through the pain of the onions, and I'm using 2 onions finely chopped up, and you're gonna put that in a little saute pan. And the next step will be adding 2 tablespoons of oil or a fake butter like the one that I'm using, which is made out of coconut oil, and we'll be sauteing it up. Okay, so our next step is using this coconut oil from Nutiva, and it is butter flavored. So I'll be using 2 tablespoons of this oil, and from there I'll be sauteing the onions and adding a little bit of salt. Alright, and I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt just to add a little bit of flavor before we make this into a soup. Okay, so we're just sauteing it now, and you'll see that it starts to smell good. And then once this is sauteed and ready to go, we'll be able to put this in the soup and proceed with our next steps. But you just want to make sure that you get the real onion flavor before you put that into the soup. About this recipe is that it doesn't necessarily taste healthy, and it's very much a comfort food, but onions are really, really great for you, and they've been known to have anti-inflammatory properties, great for heart health. There's a lot of other really wonderful benefits to them. So at the same time that you feel like you're sort of treating yourself because it has bread and cheese and is a little bit richer of a soup, you are still nourishing your body in a great way. So our onions are caramelized, they're ready to go. And what we're going to do next is actually stick this in a boiling pot. I'm going to turn off the burner first and get all of that in there, and then we'll move on to the next step, which is adding water. And that's going to be, we have the base of our soup as well, which is an onion base. So that'll be the next step, but we got this ready to go. Alright, so we're going to fill up 4 cups of water. And we're going to be adding that as well as the base of our soup, which is an onion base. And then on top of that, we're going to have a bunch of other ingredients that we will get to. But the key part right now is making sure that we get as many flavors as possible. And one of the reasons that I love this soup as well is growing up, I could never really have it. When you go to restaurants or when you go to places where they serve this type of soup, they generally have a meat base or it's made with chicken broth. And so because of that, growing up, I never really got to have it, and maybe that's why I like it so much now. and your breath might be terrible after eating it, but who cares, at least you enjoyed yourself. So the next step will be adding our garlic base, and this is a vegetable soup base that is really great for adding that extra onion flavor. So we're just gonna pop that in there and make sure to turn this on and start to stir that around. And the company that I'm using is Organic Bouillon Cubes. This is sort of an unconventional thing, but I like to add a little bit of soy sauce to it just to add that saltiness, because onion soup does tend to have a little bit more of a sodium feel, and we also don't want to be using ingredients like MSGs that give you that idea. So I'm using some organic soy sauce to make sure that we're not having GMOs or pesticides or any of those things, and still getting the vibe of an MSG, but without it actually being MSG. So I'm just adding a little splash of that, and we'll mix that, and then the next step I'm adding thyme to our mixture. I did 1 cube of the onion bouillon, and I'm going to add another half just to add a little bit of that extra flavor and let everything simmer. Okay, so right now this is getting there. It's starting to boil and to get all the flavors equally distributed. And I'm gonna actually add a little bit of olive oil just for flavor. And one thing that is really great with onions, if you ever have scraps of the bottoms of onions, you can actually grow that. And that's what I was mentioning outside with growing onions. As you can see here, this was the example that we had just picked. And that came from actually cutting it at the bottom here and putting this part in water. And you'll actually get smaller onions from doing that. It's a great free way to reutilize some of your food scraps and to make sure that you're getting the most nutrition possible when you can have access to land and grow your own onions. Okay, so our last couple of ingredients, I just picked some green onions from the garden, and I have some garlic here. So we're just going to peel and chop some garlic, stick that in the soup, and then we'll be good to go with our next step, which is baking some of the bread and putting that in the oven to bake with the soup. We'll see you then. The next step is that we're going to be using some bread. So the idea with French onion soup is that you have the soup, but you also have bread that's baked onto it with cheese. And I'm using a gluten-free bread as well as a regular bread. We have guests tonight, so we're going to be using 2 different types of bread. But for now, I'll just show you with this one. Unfortunately, I have gluten intolerance, which makes life much more difficult. But anyway, that's fine. That's another story. And I will be using just 1 piece for myself. But if you are doing this for multiple people, then you can use more. I'd suggest about 1 piece of bread per bowl of soup, and we're using bowls like this. So what I suggest is cutting this into about 4 pieces or into smaller cubes, like such. And then from there, what we're gonna do is actually stick these into our bowl, mix them with some olive oil and salt, and then bake them in the oven. And that's going to be our way of making some nice croutons that will absorb some of the soup and taste really good with cheese. Make bread today. Brito, do you want to help me stir it? Hi. He looks so scared. Hi, buddy. I swear we're nice to him. Anyway, I'll let him go now. Thank you for your sous chef abilities. You were wonderful today. Bye! You're gonna wanna make sure that each of the pieces of bread has enough olive oil that you get that nice flavor without it being saturated in oil. And another thing that you can do is actually add a little bit of thyme sprinkled on top, and it gives it a really nice flavor. So I'm just gonna lie these out on this pan and bake them in the oven for a few minutes until they're a little bit crispier, and then I'll take them out and be able to put them in my soup. Alright, so now we're going to bring this up to the oven. We're going to bake it until it's toasted and crispy, and then we will proceed to our next step in the soup. Okay, so now that this is done, we have our toasted croutons, and they're ready to go, nice and crispy. And we did it for about 10 minutes at a high heat of around 400, but just keep your eye on it and make sure that you see that it's toasted and brown and that it is a little bit crispy. And our next step is going to be filling up our bowls, which we will put these into, and then put some cheese on top. And this cheese that I'm using is vegan cheese by Daya. And so if you're looking for a good vegan cheese, I wasn't crazy about their previous versions, but this one that has the mozzarella with the pizza image is actually really good. And so we'll be using that on top and baking it in the oven until it gets crispy and brown. And yeah, we'll see you then. Okay, so I have my final masterpiece here. I baked it in the oven at 475 for about 10 minutes. And you just want to make sure that the top is crispy and brown and that everything comes together flavor-wise. And why I love this recipe, for me, it is a comfort food. And I think in this time where none of us really know what's going to happen, where life is uncertain, where we've all had to change the way that we look at what we do in our own daily lives, that food can sometimes offer us comfort, but we still want to make sure that the food that we're eating is nourishing our bodies and isn't damaging the world around us at the same time. And that's where something like this comes in really handy. You feel like you're treating yourself while at the same time you're treating your body to nourishment. So I really encourage everyone to try it. Let me know how you liked the recipe, and subscribe, like, comment down below, and I hope you enjoy it. It's hot.